As a civil rights lawyer and a professor, I spend a lot of time on a legal doctrine that, frankly, affects every single one of us: qualified immunity. Now, I know it sounds technical, but its impact on our rights and our justice system it's profound, and it's deeply disturbing.
Let's just start with this stark warning from Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor. I mean, her words really cut right to the heart of why this doctrine is so incredibly alarming.
So what is qualified immunity really? Well, first off, it's not a law passed by Congress. It's a doctrine that was created by judges. And what it does is it shields government officials from lawsuits, unless, and this is the key part, unless a person can prove they violated a clearly established right. Now, on the surface, that might sound kind of reasonable, right? But as you're about to see, the way courts have interpreted clearly established has created a nearly impossible hurdle for people who've been harmed.
Okay, let's dive right in. My whole argument here is pretty simple. Qualified immunity isn't just some legal misstep, it's a dangerous legal fiction. It's built this entire system that actually rewards misconduct by taking away the consequences, and it consistently puts the convenience of the government ahead of the constitutional rights of the people, your rights.
To really get the real-world impact of this doctrine, we actually have to step outside of the law books for a minute and just look at basic human psychology. You see, the incentives that a system creates, they're incredibly powerful.
So let's start with a really basic question. Are a person's actions just about their own character? You know, whether they're a good or bad person? Or are they powerfully shaped by the system that they're operating in? Well, the famous Stanford prison experiment gave us a pretty powerful and disturbing answer to that. You had ordinary college students put in a fake prison. Some were guards, some were prisoners. And with very little accountability, the guards embraced their power to extreme and often cruel levels. It proved it's not always about a few bad apples. The system itself, the barrel, can be what's rotten.
And this is where the parallel becomes just chillingly clear. Qualified immunity basically creates the same dynamic for government officials. By shielding them from accountability, it sends this powerful message. Your actions probably won't have consequences. You're operating under a different set of rules than everyone else.
So the crucial point here isn't just about punishing one person. It's about the dangerous incentive structure this whole doctrine creates. It tells officials that misconduct might just get a pass, and that the normal process of being held accountable is, effectively shut down. And this just fundamentally warps the entire relationship between the government and the people it's supposed to serve.
So how in the world did we get here? I mean, this doctrine, it's not written into the Constitution. It's not in the Civil Rights Act of 1871. It was invented, literally invented, by the Supreme Court. And it's just gotten worse over time, turning into the massive barrier to justice that it is today.
Let's just quickly trace how this happened. It started back in '67 with a simple, good faith defense. But the big shift came in 1982 in a case called Harlow v. Fitzgerald. That's where they got rid of the officer's personal intent and replaced it with this new standard: was the law clearly established? For a little while, courts had to at least ask if a right was violated in the first place. But then came 2009, and the Pearson v. Callahan decision changed absolutely everything.
This slide right here shows you the critical change. Before 2009, courts had to answer that first question: was a constitutional right violated? And this was so important because that's how the law grows, how it defines our rights over time. But the Pearson ruling said, you can just skip that part. This created a legal catch-22. Because if courts never rule on whether a new kind of misconduct is a violation, then that right can never become clearly established. It's a cycle that just makes it easier and easier to grant immunity.
And why? Why did the Supreme Court make this disastrous change? Was there some high-minded constitutional reason? No, not at all. The court's explicit justification was about saving time and money, basically bureaucratic convenience. Justice was sacrificed for efficiency.
Okay, now let's look at how this abstract legal mess has devastating real-world consequences. Because this isn't just a theory we debate in law schools. This is about real people whose lives are completely destroyed.
Many of us know the tragic story of Breonna Taylor. In March of 2020, officers executing a no-knock warrant entered her apartment. It led to a confrontation that ended with Miss Taylor being shot and killed in her own home.
That raid was made possible by these really vague warrant procedures. And this points to a much deeper problem. It's a problem the late Justice Antonin Scalia, not exactly a liberal icon, pointed out when he said the Fourth Amendment's warrant rule has become so riddled with exceptions that it is basically unrecognizable. So if the rules are that muddy, how can anyone ever argue that an officer violated a clearly established right?
And no surprise, in the civil lawsuits that followed, what was the first thing that came up? Qualified immunity. It immediately became a central shield for the officers. It's just a textbook example of how this doctrine isn't used to protect officers making tough split-second calls, but to shield misconduct long after the fact. This image just perfectly illustrates the real problem. Protesters pointed out, look, this isn't just about what one person did. It's about the entire system that allows and protects those actions. And qualified immunity? It's a core part of that rotten system.
So, beyond these individual tragedies, this doctrine fundamentally guts the bedrock principles of our Constitution. And I'm talking specifically about the promise of equal justice under the law for every single person.
Think about it. The 14th Amendment promises equal protection of the laws. But qualified immunity does the exact opposite. It creates two tiers of justice. It slams the courthouse doors in the faces of victims. And research shows this disproportionately harms Black and brown communities. And here's the deepest, most profound irony. The very law this doctrine guts, the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, that law was passed specifically to hold officials accountable for violating civil rights. It's been turned completely on its head. You know, federal judge Carlton Reeves put it perfectly after he was forced by legal precedent to grant immunity in a case. He said, the name itself is just deeply misleading. What they call qualified in the law books operates in the real world as something much, much closer to absolute.
So at the end of the day, the conclusion here is pretty clear. This judge-made doctrine, it's a failure on every single level. Legally, it has no basis in the laws Congress actually wrote. Practically, it prevents any real accountability for injustice. And morally, it just violates our country's most basic promise of equal justice for all.
I'll just leave you with this one final thought. The defenders of this doctrine, they always talk about efficiency, about protecting officials from silly lawsuits. But when the price of that convenience is justice itself, what have we really bought? What are we really paying for?